What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Speaking Sessions podcast. I'm here with a good friend of mine, Lisa Small, and the only time we get to talk is if we record podcasts with each other. I'm just kidding, but we did joke about that offline. It's been so long that I had to strangle her onto the podcast just to get her in front of me where we could have a conversation. But she is the co-founder and chief revenue officer of Habitual Growth, which is the #1 program for developing fortitude, confidence, and life of intent. Lisa is dedicated to the Habitual Growth mission, which is to grow 5 million lives by 2027, which is just incredible. And she is also an accomplished medtech executive with multidisciplinary industry experience spanning startups to global billion-dollar corporations. She specializes in building high-performance, engaged teams and instilling core discipline and excellence across company culture. And today we're going to dive into utilizing speaking to elevate your career. But before we get into that, Lisa, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Philip. That was such a kind introduction. I'm super happy to be here. And you're right. We either need to record multiple podcasts to catch up or take this offline.
Exactly. I was like, okay, we're rolling here. We're going offline, having a great conversation. All right, we got to get into this because I know this conversation we're about to have is going to be an incredible thing. And yeah, we could probably go on forever about that. But kind of let's backtrack a little bit. So obviously you're high up within your organization here as you're building another business on the side and everything. And you're obviously high up in that with that being the chief revenue officer there and everything. But what did Lisa look like, let's say like 10 years ago, where she wasn't this big wig, this high executive in the company and everything? And then how did you, and we'll keep it like real short and summarized, but how did you get up to the level that you're at? Because we look at people that are high up in these careers and we don't understand how they got there, especially when you're in entry level position. So explain a little bit of that journey for us.
Yeah, for sure. I'll try and keep it as short and sweet as possible. But if I backtrack to where I think the change started to occur, I actually found myself completely out of a job. I had been laid off and I looked in the mirror and there was no actual tangible skills that I felt like could be transferable. I had kind of pigeonholed myself somewhere and wasn't sure what to do. And that was an incredibly scary feeling. And I think anybody that's been in a very niche role or has been in a situation where they've laid off can absolutely relate to that kind of pit in your stomach. Like, what am I going to do now? And how do I suddenly build skills or absorb skills that, can allow me to get to my next step, but then keep you from ever being in that position again. And during that time, there was a very kind woman who took pity on me and hired me into a role that I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, yep, I'll do it. It sounds great. And just that gesture alone gave me a little boost of confidence. Like, okay, somebody actually believed in me and saw potential that I couldn't see in myself. And I think that's incredibly important for leaders when they are talking to their team members or in your personal life with people around you, communicating the potential that you see in somebody versus maybe the reality that they only see with their two eyes. But once I had that confidence of someone actually believed in me, I went down the road of personal development. And I began to look at the qualities and characteristics of a leader within the organization I was in, the CEO of the company. I kind of went down the board and watched and learned what did I need to get to the next level. And then I would come back and I would build a game plan. All right, if I build these skills and I gain these experiences, then I'll get to here. Okay, now I've been to this level. What does the next level look like? And so creating a rough roadmap every time I hit another milestone, because you will evolve and grow in your career, in your professional path, and the skills that are required to the next level may be completely different or just may need to be augmented from the place that you're at today. And so literally that's been the process that I've used, is looking at what are the outcomes that I need to achieve and breaking those down into things that I can take action on every single day.
Man, there's some great points there. And I want to start back at the beginning. There's so much we can dissect here. The first thing, so you had this person that you said gave pity on you. You didn't have skills and then you got into this role that needed certain skills, but you didn't have those. So what non-skills did you have? Like, what was your background there before you got into this other role? And what was that role that you moved into that you didn't have the skills for?
Yeah, my background is actually in pharmacy. So I'm a pharmacist by training. That's where I started my career. And at the time that I was laid off, I was at a medical device company, working not necessarily directly with patient care pharmacy, but still with pharmaceutical medications. Went through a layoff and was connected with a woman, still in medical device, but in medical writing for coronary heart valves. So patients that need some sort of valve replacement procedure. So one, I didn't know anything about those types of devices. I had never done anything remotely close to medical writing. I could write some narratives, but the last, major essays that I had ever written would have been back in college, and didn't understand the regulatory landscape around the clinical studies that we'd be working with and how to get the documents that we'd be drafting for different regulations, all the way through to approval. So what made the difference, I believe, I came to the interviews extremely prepared. So I would say that was one of the skills that I had coming to the table. Was I was determined to figure out a path forward to show that I could learn. So I came with my binders of prepared examples of writing, and I talked to everybody that I could and tried to understand the role and the regulations so I could speak some of the language going through. But outside of that, just being willing to show that I'll do the hard work and I'll learn as quickly as I could and be moldable for what that job entailed. I think those were absolutely skills that I brought, but then also had to use as I grew in that position.
And I would say that's probably what helped you get that position, because you showed like, hey, I'm willing to take that initiative. Here, I've got all this stuff. I don't think I know everything and that I just have it all in my head. Like, I'm going to bring stuff with me to make sure that I have it all right here, at least at a minimum. And this reminds me a lot of a friend of mine that he's an engineer, very smart guy, and he was in a role that he wasn't happy with, and he wanted to move within the company. And speaking really held him back. He's like, well, I really want to go back to this old department, but it's a new manager, so I don't know the guy. I was like, just get a coffee with the guy. Just put something on the calendar and get a coffee. And of course, I'm extroverted, even though I'm an engineer as well. Like, I'm extroverted. So I'm like, I'll just go get a coffee. I don't care. Like, networking, that's what you do. And he was so scared to do it. But finally, I gave him enough nudges that he went and did it. And lo and behold, he was able to go back to that apartment because he took that initiative. And so that's a huge thing, that in order to develop in your career, you have to take some of that initiative and you have to have those conversations. It's not always a coffee, but just going and meeting with a manager or something. And so that really parlays in the next part of your career, where you would see these different managers or executives and you were like, hey, I like the things that they were doing. For those of us, maybe we're in such a large organization, or we're so distant, whether it be physical distance or they're just in maybe a different building, or we just don't see them a lot for whatever reason. How did you see these skill sets that these executives had so that you could kind of model after that to help you get to that next level and understand, like, hey, these are the skills that executive had, so you could do the modeling?
Yeah, I think you can learn agnostic of your location. Obviously, probably you and I started our careers remote based. Work was a lesser percentage of the time, and now many of us are in completely virtual environments. I don't think that inhibits our ability to learn from others. I think if anything, it potentially augments. You can't take the place of personal connection. So if people have the opportunity to get a coffee or to swing by someone's office, I think those conversations are incredibly important. However, I would watch different levels of management or any meetings that I attended, what kind of presentations were being presented. What did it look like? How did they outline it? How much did they speak to it? How much was more ad lib, could I tell? I took note of body language when people were speaking, even just on Zoom. Did they smile? Did they appear warm? Was it very stern? And then tried to get a sense of what I would want to replicate, because I saw that being an asset in their career and something that I could work to build in my own. So a lot of it was, yes, listening and learning in a number of different ways, but then beginning to filter through what did I actually want to take forward because it resonated with me? You're never going to be what somebody else is. So which of those components of all those people could I stand behind because I felt like it was authentic to me, and then work in conversations or presentations or meetings to start to try those out so that I became more comfortable with them.
And did you just have opportunities to do these presentations, or did you kind of like create those? Because I can see where, especially like a highly technical person, they're probably not doing a lot of presentations. So they may have to like find those opportunities. Like, was that just something that was part of your job, or did you kind of create some of those as well?
I would say I created most of those, and I'm laughing a little bit because I kid you not, there were times I just created presentations because I wanted the experience of creating a presentation and then gauging how someone else would react to the way that content was laid out, the way that I talked about it. So I would literally create things and come to just one-on-one meetings and say, hey, I created this slide. Let me walk through this with you. Tell me what what resonated with you. Where do you think I can do better? Asking for feedback is something that you should never not do. It might not be what you want to hear, and people might look at you funny for a little while, but eventually they'll get used to, the fact that you really are trying to genuinely grow. So I very much was proactive in however I could in my career. I also volunteered for a number of organizations, both within the companies that I worked for, but then also in my community, just to have the experience of speaking and presenting in front of different size groups, different ages, different backgrounds, so that I became more comfortable and then could translate that back into the next opportunity that was potentially on my plate.
Okay. And was this feedback like you went to managers for that, or just kind of anybody that would allow you just to talk with them?
But, I mean, anybody. I mean, I think, there's the formal management review process that you get in, on your annual cycle or however that is. I was also very proactive in the personal development and professional development plans, and would, be vocal about, hey, I'm going to ask for feedback and this is why. These are the skills that I'm trying to build. So if you could curtail what your feedback is, and how it can help me. And then it also gave people opportunities to look for things where I could use those skills so that I wasn't the only one that was constantly trying to identify them. Some people honestly were like, no, like this is just not, I don't have time for this, or this isn't something that I'm willing to do. And that's completely fine. But more often than not, to your earlier point, if you just take the risk and ask, people genuinely do want to help and they will continue to support you.
Yeah, and that's so cool that you did that. And a lot of people don't take that initiative, and myself included there. I don't just go up to somebody or for a manager and say, "Hey, you want to take a look at my presentation? See what you think?" That's definitely a unique thing. And really, you're not only getting that feedback, you're building that rapport with that person, because it's saying like, "Hey, I want your feedback. You're somebody that I respect and want that feedback from." And then you're also really selling yourself too, because if you're just going, "Hey, come look at this presentation," like, what? Who are you to
Why?
boss me around? Like, hey, do you mind? Would you mind taking some time where we can go over this presentation? Would love to get your feedback on it. Yeah, you're just really selling yourself, but then you're also kind of putting them on a pedestal a little bit, because like, hey, I feel like you know more than me on this subject or
Yeah.
presentation skills and everything. So you're really learning sales and communication and speaking skills, which is such a vital thing. And you being an executive, I would love for you to speak on that, because a lot of times people think, well, I'm not going to get on stage. I'm not speaking in front of a bunch of people. Why do I need to get better at speaking? So let's speak to that person first, of why in the first place is it important at all for you to get better at speaking, and then we'll kind of dive in from there.
Yeah, I think, okay, let's take an example. You're at the grocery store and you're going down the aisle and you come up on somebody, and you and I are both extroverted. So we're going to say hi. And the person that you are now in a conversation with, their entire body language is less confident. They talk very softly. You are going to create a perception in your mind immediately based off what you see and hear. And why I believe that learning to speak and to speak well and to continue to grow that skill is because you gain confidence. You don't know who that person is that's going to say hi to you at the grocery store. You don't know if any opportunities may come out of it, but you just building that skill gives off a different energy of confidence because it's not an anomaly, it's a regular occurrence and something that you're actively working to build. So someone may not necessarily want to rise to the utmost levels of executive leadership in a company. I would be willing to bet that most people would like to show up more confidently in their daily life. And that comes from practicing to speak and learning how you carry yourself and conduct conversations.
Yeah. And not to mention, if you don't want to get that executive level, if you can learn to communicate well, you can defend yourself. I've been there where I just felt like the little guy in the room. I've been told I was the young, dumb engineer that was ironically making everything work, but yet I'm a young, dumb engineer. How that works, I don't know, but I wouldn't speak up for myself. So that's kind of what the rumor was going around. And I didn't combat that because it was early in my career. And I felt like, well, I better not say anything because I'll get fired, which I found that it's challenging to get fired as long as you're not doing anything that harms safety or any kind of harassment, anything like that. That's very much, okay, you're going to get fired on the spot for this.
Right. Yeah.
So keep that in mind. If you speak up for yourself and defend yourself, I mean, you're defending yourself. So if somebody wants to say, hey, you can't do that anymore, you shouldn't be doing that. Well, probably a company you should be leaving as soon as you can because they clearly don't care about you. They just care about money. But aside from that, learning to be able to stand up for yourself and speak up for yourself is going to help you in your career, just get to a pay raise or get recognized and get that recognition for the things that you do. So speaking is very important, whether you literally want to go up the ranks or the ladder in the corporate world, or if you want to just stay where you're at, but continue to be acknowledged and get pay raises.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, I think it's really good to point out too that to be able to defend yourself, but also to be able to articulate your point logically, despite the emotions that you may be feeling behind what you're saying. And that is also something that has grown by placing yourself in different positions and learning to say what you need to say. And then also the awareness of how your emotions will affect how you speak so that you can practice becoming more level, becoming more logic so that you can command the conversation versus be reactive to the conversation.
And this makes me think of two different distinct questions. So first one, it should be hopefully be a little bit easier. I got asked this the other day and I gave my thoughts on it, but I'd be curious from an executive's perspective on this. So say that somebody's trying to present and they're presenting on a topic and then the executive or executives, they kind of go down that rabbit hole. And we see this in meetings all the time. So it's pretty natural. As the presenter, that is, we'll say non-management presenter presenting to executives that are deciding, oh, this topic, we need to go into a rabbit hole. What would be your approach for that non-managerial, non-leadership presenter to basically tell the executives, hey, let's get back on track? Obviously in a nicer way. What would be your approach for that non-managerial presenter to these executives that are doing that?
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, respect is at the core because you're not there to shame anybody from trying to go down a rabbit hole or to make anybody feel disrespected. And so I think just acknowledging, hey, the intent of this presentation or this conversation was to solve X or to find a solution for Y. This is a conversation that seems like it needs a place of its own. Should we have a consensus that this is the appropriate time to have this side conversation, or do we want to table this for a later date so that we can focus on the solution or the conversation that was the purpose of this meeting? And then just put it back. I think it's not the presenter's position to drive to that decision, but to merely point out this was why I'm here and the purpose for it. And now we're maybe going in a different direction. Is this the right time or not?
I like that. That's definitely better said than my answer. My answer was, have an agenda set up. So when you're presenting, hey, we're going to go through these topics, and if you got some times, they're great. And as they get off, like, hey, look, we need to get back. This is where we're at in the agenda. We're going to cover some other things. So I want to make sure that we stay on track. So kind of
Yep.
faulting the agenda itself instead of saying that they're not doing the right thing. But
Yep.
I like your approach there too. I think it's a great way because they may have some outside information that you, as that's supposed to be like the technical expert, doesn't know about, and that's why they're bringing it up, because maybe it's been brought up in several meetings and this is a very important topic. So I do like that approach to that. So I was curious on that. But when it comes to like just presenting yourself, where do you feel that confidence comes into play with presenting and everything?
I believe that confidence comes through repetition and comes from intentionally placing yourself in situations where you are going to be uncomfortable. So I believe that every single day we do things that build our confidence because we decide what those are that move us towards our goals. So for example, if someone wants to continue to speak and grow that skill, they will focus actions every single day that move them closer. I also think it's important that we look for opportunities to put ourselves in situations that are not within our comfort zone, because that's where the real growth occurs. You may have to learn to speak in a different manner or to deliver a message slightly differently because it's not being heard in the way that you intended it to. You may have to learn how to change the fluctuations in your voice or how your facial expressions read. And I think all of those things come through the different situations that you're in, but also by doing them over and over. So you think less about them when you're in the moment of speaking or presenting than you did, earlier on when you were building that skill.
I like that. And I just thought about two other questions I'd love to ask since I've got you here. We're in a boardroom. We're speaking to executives, and a lot of times what seems to happen, and I think maybe some of this is from their background information, we go as the expert to present on a topic, and it seems like they just make the decision. Like we don't get to have any say in that decision. We just basically have to go be a good soldier and execute on their decision. And as we know, the executives don't know all the nitty gritty details. And so sometimes that decision that they've made doesn't logically make sense with the day-to-day operations.
Mhm.
How could we as a presenter, one, maybe be able to have input within that besides here's the information, what are we doing next? But then also be able to, I guess, rebuttal, if you will, and say, look, based on XYZ, that's why I don't think this is the right decision. Can we discuss this a little bit more or something? So what's your thoughts on that?
I don't think that we're ever in a position to do rebuttal. I think.
Yeah, I could come up with a better word, but yeah.
Sorry, I had to point that one out. I think it's important to do two things. One, when you're presenting in that scenario, you are there as a subject matter expert. And we can, in that position, assume that we know far more than potentially the other members in the boardroom. This may or may not be true, but that should never come through in the way you conduct your presentation or that you speak. You should speak as if you're talking to, an executive leader. So it's respectful and calm and contains the right level of detail. If you get too technical, you run the risk that you are making them feel inferior because they can't follow the conversation, and that will cause them potentially to create conflict or rebuttals to whatever you're saying. So finding a sweet spot of communicating in a way that shows that I know what I'm talking about, but I'm not over explaining it so that it makes you feel like I know more than you. The other piece that's really important is to scenario plan for them. So if you're there sharing something, you're not just giving the details of this is what I think we should do. This is what I think we should do and why, and back it up with real life data. And this is the impact if we go this route, and this is the impact if we don't. And that's where you bring your day-to-day operational view and say, if this decision is made, this is how it's going to impact my team. And that could be time, money, whatever that impact is. And so you kind of force the options by showing the impact.
I like that. And that's similar to what I've talked about. Like, you present a problem, you tell like what you think the solution is and some viable next steps. Because a lot of times, they're not in that day to day. So now you're forcing them to make a decision with really a lot of lack of information, or you basically lob it up to them and say, hey, what do we do here? The ball's coming. Like, you can decide. I'm giving you 2 balls. Choose which way you want to go. So I like that. Like, hey, here's the consequences if we do go this direction. Here's consequences if we don't, and let them decide which is kind of the better of the two or the worse of two. Like, what decision do we want to make? So I like that a lot. That's a great approach there.
Yeah. And if there's an opportunity to create even a third scenario that shows that you've taken initiative and you've critically thought about it. So in their mind, there may only be 2 viable options. You may see that there's actually something in the middle that can work that lessens the impact on from a day-to-day operational, but still achieves the ultimate goal of whatever they're looking for.
Yeah, which is key there. Their goal, what the goal
That's
they
right.
want, which I talk about that a lot too, is like, you need to figure out where they want to go.
Yeah.
And of course, you need to know where you want to go to with this. Why are you going to them? Because you want a commitment on a certain thing, but also, what do they want? And so, especially from a manufacturing perspective, safety is the number one thing. So if you can bring up, if we don't do this, safety is going out the window. Well, that should get some pretty good buy-in. And if not, well, we need to get some new executives in there, because clearly they're not worried about what should be the number one important thing within any company, which is safety. And then my other question here. So one last question in the boardroom, and then we'll get you out of the boardroom there and everything. But how do we connect with different managers in the boardroom? Because they are all pretty different. And a lot of times, especially when we're first going into the boardroom, we probably really don't know these managers that way. We might know their name, know what they look like, a little bit about them. But how do we start to connect with the managers and then connect with the different backgrounds that these managers have, to make that connection, to get that buy-in and have ultimately a great presentation and the results we want?
Yeah, I think, if there's any background information or digging that you can do ahead of time to understand nuances of maybe personality characteristics or initiatives or goals that the specific individuals in the boardroom may be coming to the table with, that's always incredibly helpful. If you can have any conversations or investigations ahead of time, absolutely do that, because then you can tailor how you present based on some of those. If you're walking in completely blind and all you have is a name and a title, I always tell people to become a master of reading nonverbals, because as you begin to present and share and go through whatever topic it is that you are speaking on, watch around the room and see who's resonating with you. And you can then adjust to be able to create a connection. And if someone's they're leaning in, they're smiling, they seem engaged, you can point at them, you can ask them a follow-up question, you can ask for their thoughts, and begin to create conversation within the group itself that then will help you understand the personalities of other members. So if you can get people talking by identifying 1 or 2 people that are resonating as you start, that's really helpful too.
And that's such a great thing, because you get that buy-in from that one person, which they're in that room all the time with those other people. That means they can sway the rest of the people to have buy-in, because they'll trust that person before they'll trust you, because you're that new person in there. So that's a great thing to do right there. Look for that body language for sure. I like that. Something else I also like to kind of fault to, if you will, is like core values, or what's the company mission, and try and point these things back to those as much as you can within reason. Like, if trust is one of your core values, don't be like, oh, well, you should trust me on this, or, there's a lot of trust that's going into this project. Like, don't try and just squeeze it in just to squeeze it in. Make sure it makes some sense within what you're talking about. But I like to do that as well, especially if I'm trying to pitch a company from the outside. I try and use some of those things to help relate with that company as well, which is a good thing. And so these executives, hopefully they do like the core values. Hopefully they're bought into them. So that could be just another thing as well. But like you said, I definitely think that's the best approach, is to try and look at the body language and see who's actually shaking their head and leaning in, and then asking that question. It's a great thing. We don't think about doing, I just got to talk the whole time to them instead of getting them engaged, which
and
really is how it's going to engage them.
That's right. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
One of the things that, if it's possible, depending on the topic, is to come with a thought of like maybe potential questions. So as you're sitting there, because at the end of the day, the executives want to know that whatever you're saying is going to speak to what's important to them and the decision that they have to make. So if you can come and ask questions of one or two of those people that really seem to be connecting with you, that then can generate a conversation. So, let's just pretend we're talking about safety, and building trust with external customers. And then you can launch and say, I'm just curious. I've only been here for 5 years. Would anybody be willing to share with me an experience where we really did a great job building customer trust in the products that we are building, and what you feel really made us successful in doing so? And create an open-ended question that allows people to start talking. And then you might get someone else that then is like, well, remember in this time we really did it poorly. And you can start to pull out pieces of information from each individual based on what they're saying. You can determine what's going to be most important and what's going to ultimately be their decision-making point.
I like that. That's great. And so let's go ahead and transition here to habitual growth. So you mentioned about fortitude, confidence, and living a life with intent. What made you decide to start habitual growth and really focus on those three key areas in life?
Well, two things, actually. One was just a gap that I noticed in my professional career with all of the teams that I've had the opportunity to lead. Professional development for every team member has been vitally important. And I didn't feel that while these were great organizations and companies to work for, the level of personal characterization of a professional development plan was there in enough detail that people could actually act upon it. And so I wanted to create a process that met people where they were at and then help them build not only from a personal standpoint, but to look at their professional goals and figure out where those intersected so they could focus their time and attention there. So some of the decision to start Habitual Growth was purely because I wanted my team to succeed at a higher level. And they could only do that by focusing on personal development in tandem with their professional development. The other catalyst of it actually was in my own personal life. Several years ago, my father passed away very quickly from stage 4 lung cancer. And his funeral was so well attended, and people recanted stories of how he impacted them in their community. He was a pharmacist as well. He was a business owner his whole life. And I just thought, man, I want to live up to that legacy of creating a positive impact. And that's where our mission came. And so I thought about, how can I create that kind of positive legacy impact? Well, I love people and I love developing people and supporting them on their journey. And so that really created the foundation for the company today.
Oh man, that is awesome. And I can't help but think of my dad and his funeral. It was very similar. He was a business owner, but he mowed fields for a living. So basically cut grass in a field and everything. But he had so many people show up. And even actually my father-in-law was the same way. He built tractors. He fixed tractors and stuff. And same way, because they lived to their word. So I'm guessing that's a lot of what it was for your dad and everything too, just living to his word. And I'm just curious. I want to ask about the app, but I want to ask real quick, of fortitude, confidence, and intentionality, which one, if you could only pick one, would be the most important for you to live out?
That's a terrible question.
I know, it's awesome.
I think the most important one is intention. That's really the basis, because that comes from you as an individual and what you want. And by living with intention, which means you craft your days in alignment with who you are and what you want to achieve, you build confidence and fortitude. So hands down, living with intention is the highest priority.
Okay, awesome. And so where is this app? So by the time this launches, our episode comes out, the app should be launched. So where can people pick up the app and learn more about Habitual Growth?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are available in both Apple and Google Play stores, so people can download the app. There's a free 30-day trial, so you can go in and kind of mess around with it and see. The app is our tool, so individuals or teams or companies that are looking for more of a complete package experience, how the process works, how to deploy it in their own life or with their own team, they can reach directly out to me or to us through the website. And we just build packages to whatever someone needs. So they may just want to know, like, hey, I want to just walk through the app, make sure I've set everything up. And that's great. And versus we have some teams and businesses that really want, to look at this from an annual basis because they are really pouring into their employees and what they can help them achieve, not only as a company, but also as individuals on that team.
Okay. And so where is that they can reach out? So you and your website, that doesn't tell me. So tell me real quick where that is.
All right. Our website is habitualgrowth.com. Thank you for that point out. And my email is lisa@habitualgrowth.com. Either one of those, I will get back to you very quickly. Our website has more information on all the different features, as well as a direct link to download the app.
Okay, great. And then if they want to reach out and just get to follow you, see what you got going on, because you're always posting some great stuff that's inspirational, where can they reach out to you there at or follow you there at?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, The Real Lisa Small. That's more of my personal journey from a development standpoint. If people are interested in more of professional content, they can find me on LinkedIn, Lisa Small, and I'm happy to connect in either spot.
All right. And one last question for you, and this one is going to be a tough one, maybe not.
All right.
If you only had one message that you could share for the rest of your life, what would that message be?
Ooh. I think I already said it, actually. I think the most important message is to look in each person at what their potential is and to communicate that potential that you see, because so many people just walk through life every single day and are just waiting for someone to look at them and see something in them. And when you speak that, it becomes truth to them and it resonates in a way that they can take action on it. So that would be my biggest. I
love that. That's a great message. And does that come from that lady that gave you that opportunity?
Yeah, partially. I when you've hit a low spot and someone recognized something, you want to replicate that for someone else.
Yeah, that's just an example right there of we need to just treat people well, no matter what, because you never know where somebody's at. So a very good point. Well, Lisa, I appreciate your insights here. I know I gave you some tough questions. We had you in the boardroom for a long time, interrogating you and everything, but appreciate you for coming on the podcast and sharing such great value to help us learn how important speaking is in order to advance your career.
Thank you so much, Philip. It's been a pleasure.